Hey everybody, it's your lovely host Greg Avola back again. Sorry we're starting a little late tonight. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm super excited that you're joining us on our virtual happy hour on Thursday evening. And I've been more excited to have our guest on today, a longtime friend of mine, John Holl. And John, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Hey, that's a heck of a introduction, and I can't even live up to that hype. Like, I didn't even know we were friends right until this very moment. So
yeah, that's very, very funny stuff. John and I have known each other for a very long game since the early days of Untapped. We've always been communicative. I can't believe Untapped's almost 10 years in October. It's pretty crazy. But for people who don't know who you are, John, maybe a quick background of what you do, a little bit about Beer Edge, and a little bit of a quick promo for yourself.
I've been a journalist covering the beer industry for, 20 years now, more or less. And I've been the editor of some really cool magazines like All About Beer. Mm-hmm. And I host some podcasts as well, which maybe we can talk about later on. But these days I am the editor and co-founder of Beer Edge, which is a newsletter for beer professionals that I launched with Andy Crouch, who is another beer writer and longtime player in this space. We did that back just a couple months ago, I guess. And it's been really well received, and it's fun to, cover this really dynamic industry. And so we're fortunate to do it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've known you through all your publications, All About Beer. I remember going to one of your festivals you put on, on the Durham Bulls field, I believe it was, all back in the day.
Yeah, those were fun.
Those are a lot of fun. So I'm excited to kind of dig into the beer world. We have lots to discuss, especially with COVID-19 hitting, and some of your thoughts on that. But the most important part of whatever we do with Virtual Happy Hour is for our drinking our beer. Before we get to that, I want to talk about our sponsor this evening for our individual show here. I want to thank our friends.
Greg.
Yeah, exactly. Got to thank our friends at Postmates there. And Postmates is giving a $100 delivery credit for all new Postmates customers. If you're not familiar with Postmates, it's a delivery service for both beer, food, and everything else in between, especially in this time of need within the industry. We want to give our support to those that are able to do takeout or curbside. So use the promo code UNTAPPED for $100 delivery credit off of your new Postmates customers there. Once again, that's Postmates, and use the UNTAPPED code to get $100 off your first order. Thanks for Postmates for sponsoring this show. So more importantly, about the beer. Now, if you saw on Saturday's session, I know you were on there, John, we were talking to Augie Carton. Still have his tin up here on the back here, but I'm continuing the trend of carton beers. I've got 077XX, which is their double IPA. I've actually never had this beer before, which, believe it or not, is crazy to me, as much as I love the carton brand. This is I love all the stuff they do, and I'm excited to try their double IPA here. John, what are you drinking on your side?
So I'm also staying in Jersey, but I went up to Jersey City, and this is Departed Souls, and this is a rum barrel aged imperial porter brewed with cocoa and smoky chipotle peppers, and it's called Peppers. And it's actually named after my dog. That's my dog Pepper on the label. And I was thinking about the dog today, and she's going to have some surgery tomorrow. She's got a bit of a tumor on her spleen, and it's been sort of a rough day. And I thought, what a good way to sort of honor her, but also sort of take the edge off of a stressful day by going into like a 10% ABV barrel aged porter. And I brewed this at Departed Souls a couple years ago. We put it into the Pro-Am category. It was Carl Weiss, who is a great home brewer here in New Jersey, and Brian Kulbaki, who's the brewer at Departed Souls. The three of us got together to make this beer. And nice. It was a lot of fun to do.
Cool. Well, let's raise our glass and do a little cheers. Cheers to your dog. Hopefully everything else is going well with that. And cheers to the community. Thank you all for joining.
Cheers, guys.
Wow. This is an amazing beer. Most of the time you have a double IPA, it's incredibly thick, incredibly hoppy and bitterness. This is totally drinkable. If I didn't know this was listed as a double on the can, I would think it's more of a single. So let's definitely nod Augie and his crew for that stuff as well. So very exciting. Make sure if you are checking in, make sure you check in at the Untapped at Home venue, and also share your photos on Instagram and Twitter, and we'll reshare them as we see them. Make sure you're tagging your comments and always drinking at home. That's the most important part in this time of need. We've created a special venue for you guys called Untapped at Home. You you earn a special local badge for all you're checking in at that lake location. So make sure you guys do that. And we're excited to see what you're drinking. Share in the comments. We're going to be talking to John a lot about his history, his background, some of his thoughts on the current industry, some of the changes, obviously, that are happening with COVID. But if you have a question for John, make sure you ask it in the comments section. And we'll make sure we flag it so we can give him a chance to answer that on the show.
I'm terrified of the question that's section.
If you're out there, make sure you make John terrified by asking terrifying questions. That'll be really fun.
Because I'm a reporter, right? So I ask questions for a living, but I'm not used to necessarily being asked questions myself. So this is humbling.
And I've been asked by many questions from John in the hot seats, and now I'm excited to be on the other side asking him questions of all of the cool stuff going on in the world. I really appreciate it.
What you got?
All right, so let's start out with some really doozies here. So a little bit about yourself. Obviously, talk about the Beer Edge, but a little bit about your history, where you started in this area. I know that obviously you're working at some magazines all about beer. How did this all start for you? How did you get into this industry, and how's that progression been?
So I was a real reporter for a lot of years. I started actually as a reporter when I was 16. I got a summer internship at a television station here in New Jersey that had an evening newscast, and I was able to, go and interview governors and go and, cover breaking news and fires and floods and everything else in between. And then I got some jobs in college, and I got to work at the New York Times for a while, about a decade or so of my career, and I got to travel around a little bit. And whenever I would travel, I'd try to seek out the local brewery, and this was 2000, 2001,
right.
And there just weren't a lot of breweries at the time. It was like 700 in the country or thereabouts, maybe like 1,000 or something. And so it was fun to find them and, learn about styles. And what I always thought was really cool was that you could meet a brewer and you could see the equipment where the beer was made and then drink the beer while looking at the equipment. And there's not still even a lot of industries where you can do that. And so, or areas that you can do that in your life, you don't necessarily go to the Ford plant to buy your Ford, you go to the dealership and that kind of thing. So, so I was sort of smitten by it, and I slowly started to write about beer. And then when the newspaper industry, along with everything else, tanked in 2008, I left the papers that I had been working for and went freelance, essentially, and started writing about beer. Up until that point, I'd really been covering crime and politics and all these other, fun, sort of miserable things, which I love. There's no other job quite like it, but it was really just a great amount of fun to go and to start writing about beer and to tell the stories of what was happening, especially with American craft, and also what was happening globally. And if you think about 12 years ago in the US, it was crazy. And just the growth that was starting to happen and styles emerging and people being all sorts of crazy with ingredients. And so so I got to become the editor of All About Beer magazine, and I was there for 5 years, and then I worked for some other places, and that was fun. And now I get to continue to do what I like to do, which is talk to brewers and hopefully write engaging content and ask interesting questions and get fascinating answers back. So it's my life doesn't suck by any means, and it really never has. I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to cover a really cool industry and to have access and see things that most people only get to read about. So it's fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Obviously, their industry is changing so rapidly. Of being on the other side of this, working in this industry on the tech side for a very long time, I've seen the change from how brewers look at different things when it comes to technology. But more importantly, looking at the back of your wall, all the beers and all the labels on the back of that is something amazing on its own. To see all the cool things and all the travels you've been able to kind of see in your time, it's I have a wall full of all these tacker tins, but I don't have anything like that on the back of your thing there.
In fairness, that's the beer fridge.
So, that I did not know. Insider information from John Holl right there.
That's the beer fridge. Everything is very skillfully framed. You can see I'm in my basement office right now, which does get light during the day, but I had to take the lampshade off of the lamp so that I was actually illuminated. The rest of the basement is a wreck. It's under construction, but this whole little nicely framed area here is like a TV set. So
it's perfect. It works. It works.
I have a basement full of beer, and that's I get to review beer. I'm over at Wine Enthusiast these days as a contributing editor, and I get to do the blind reviews for them, and that's great fun as well. So
nice.
no shortage of beer in the house.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about Beer Edge. Obviously, that's your new venture you started recently. How did that come together? Obviously, with all the things that you've done in your career, I've always known you to be on podcasts. You've got a lot of podcasts, and we'll get to those a little later. But how did the Beer Edge start, and what is this goal and mission in terms of trying to provide this information to consumers?
So last summer, I unexpectedly found myself unemployed, and I was talking to friends and trying to figure out what was going to come next. And Andy Crouch and I started talking, and Andy's been a friend for a really long time. He was a longtime beer advocate columnist, I think from issue 1 until the last one. And he's written some great books that everybody has forgotten. And he and I started talking. We said, well, what does the beer space need right now? And we realized that there was an opportunity to do a targeted newsletter to folks in the industry, a subscription based, telling the stories of what's happening behind the scenes, hopefully, giving people interesting information and important information to help their business grow and be better in a rapidly evolving arena and a rapidly evolving field. And then we decided to launch some podcasts with it as well. I've been behind the mic at podcasts at the various places that I've worked for the last couple of years. And I love the intimacy of the medium. And I love being able to sit down and look somebody in the eye and have a couple of beers with them and really sort of get to, we say on the podcast, get to the bottom of every pint. But, the first show that I ever did, the first podcast that I ever did solo was for All About Beer magazine, and we called it After Two Beers. And the premise of that show was I would sit down with somebody, we would have 2 pints, and then we would start recording. And I found that that was a really beneficial way of having a conversation with somebody because we already had a rapport. We already, had a couple beers in us. And I found that the conversations flowed really well. And I still try to do that when I can for the other shows that I've done, and certainly the shows that I'm doing now. But yeah, Beer Edge was just sort of born out of necessity because of the situation, but also a desire to still cover this industry that I'm really passionate about covering and being able to do it with somebody like Andy Crouch. So it's been a lot of fun so far. And like I said earlier, we're, gratified by the reception that we've had.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of interviews, one of the questions that we're getting in the channel right now from Ryan Garrity is he wants to know who your best interview you've ever had with, considering that you've gone through this whole slew of opportunities here, now launching something with Beer Edge. Is there something that sticks out in your brain as oh my God, this is an amazing interview, or the content is just out of this world, not what I expected?
I always like it when I can talk to brewers, not necessarily about beer, or to find out like what gets them, geeked out. So, a lot of brewers do podcasts, and folks have, answer the question of, like, where did you start, or what do you do, or, what's your favorite beer, things like that. And those are fine questions, but I feel like that for some of the people, like in the First Name Club, here, like Garrett or Sam or Matt or even Augie, I guess now at this point, they've answered these questions before, and so they sort of had their stock and trade answers. So if I can find something that's different, I feel like those are great interviews. So for the new podcast, Drink Beer, Think Beer, I was in Belgium, and Matt Brindelson of Firestone Walker is in Belgium. And he and I got together. We had some coffees, we had some beers, we sort of, toured around some breweries. And then we sat down in this barrel room and we just started talking. And all he wanted to do was talk about foam. And and it was ridiculous. And I started laughing, but then I was like, well, hell, if Matt Brindelson wants to talk about foam, let's talk about foam.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And, because you can't necessarily force where these things go, and you just sort of have to be open to it. So, that was a fun conversation. Back at the All About Beer days, I did an interview with Laura Bell, who was then at Bell's Brewery, daughter of Larry, and, was running the brewery. We had this really candid conversation about what it's like to be a woman in the beer industry. And here she was running this super successful, super well-known brewery. But, she talked about the struggles and troubles that she was having just by being a woman. And I felt like those kind of conversations are important as well. And so I've always tried to bring in, people who are not necessarily, famous or not necessarily there to rep a product, but rather to just like have a, what's on their mind at that point, what's important to them, because ultimately I think that's going to be important to us, the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. One comment from another person in the chat about the beer drinking. Chris Betts says, since you're drinking in the Departed Soul, have you ever tried any of their gluten-free beers?
Yeah.
I've heard some great things about what they've been able to do. Any comment on those?
Yeah, I actually just did a podcast with Brian Kolbaki and Karen Hertz of Holiday Brewing in Colorado on the state of gluten-free, and that's on the Drink Beer, Think Beer channel. But I used to live in Jersey City, so Departed Souls was my local, and every Friday afternoon I would go down with my daughter, and we'd go, and I'd have a pint, and she'd sort of run around and scare their dog, and then we'd leave, and whatever they had on tap, gluten-free or not, I always enjoyed. And yeah, I think it's a great option to have these days. And as brewers are looking to grow their audiences, I think looking at gluten-free, gluten reduced, or any other thing that can get somebody in is important. And Brian's doing that really well.
Yeah. Speaking of kind of food and gluten and all those things before, not only have you been writing journalism articles on beer, but you've also written a few books specifically on some topics of food as well. How did that happen? I mean, obviously, working as a journalist, you obviously meet people in the beer industry, obviously in the publication industry. When did the idea of a book kind of come across your plate? And then how did you kind of react to that? There's got to be a good story around that.
So I want to remember, I'm trying to think of like the first book that I wanted to do, which I can't even remember at this point, but I had reached out to Story Publishing, which is in Massachusetts, and they did Randy Mosher's book, Tasting Beer. And I reached out to the editor that he thanked in the acknowledgments and said, hi, I'd like to write a book about, XYZ, like cult beers or, something silly back then. And the editor said, Margaret Sutherland, who is wonderful, said, I don't know if that's a real fit, but I've been thinking about a beer cookbook. Would you like to write a beer cookbook? And a lesson that I was taught very early on in journalism was always say yes and then figure it out later on. If it's not something that you're familiar about writing about. And so I said, sure, absolutely. And so I wrote the American Craft Beer Cookbook, which came out, I think, in 2013 now at this point. And then I followed that up with another cookbook called Dishing Up New Jersey, which is a love letter to the state of New Jersey, which is where I'm from. And that's sort of a fun book as well. And then I've done some other books. Drink Beer, Think Beer, the book came out, I guess, 2 years ago from Hachette. And they were just sort of looking for what's the take of the beer world right now. And like I said, I've been fortunate to cover this industry for quite a while and travel the world and drink beers and talk to people and see things up close. And so I just sort of shared an overall state of the beer industry and how we can all sort of be mindful drinkers. It's not necessarily about, always checking in. It's not always necessarily about, getting the new, the rare, the local, or standing in line, or all of those things are important, I think, in the whole universe of beer drinking, but there's also other things that we should be focusing on. And so that's what that book was all about, Drink Beer, Think Beer.
Nice. Yeah, speaking of where we're at today, it's a good kind of segue into a lot of questions from the channel and also from our initial kind of discussions on your take.
Are we really getting questions?
Oh, we're really getting questions. I'm not making this stuff up, Sean. Why would I do that to you? Why would I put you in the hot seat just for the sake of putting you in the hot seat? But specifically around COVID-19, obviously, you're really hurting a lot of local breweries out there. What's your overall take here? I've talked to a lot of brewers on these shows on Saturdays and Thursdays, and one of the things that I've seen the most is some of the governmental changes that have been happening to do home delivery for beer, helping these local breweries kind of, that are taproom driven in terms of sales, try to figure out exactly how they're going to make it. What's your overall take on this? I mean, obviously, this is hurting a lot of people out there. A lot of jobs are being lost, even at the bigger ones. What's your kind of vision for this post-COVID? What do you see for that?
Man, if I knew exactly what it was going to be, I'd be making a lot more money because journalism is, pretty cheap. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for a lot of people. And the longer it goes on, while people are practicing safe social distancing or practicing really trying to flatten the curve, I think it's going to be tough for a lot of breweries. We're already starting to see the supply chain break down a little bit. And we're already starting to see certain supplies like aluminum for cans or bottles or, crowlers come under fire. And so I think it's going to be really difficult for a lot of breweries who, for the most part, were making, when you think about the 8,100 or so breweries in the country at the beginning of this year, a lot of them were just making money in their tap rooms. They were open on the weekend. They'd make a couple of bucks, when people would come in, and they were living week to week, and maybe they were saving a little bit, but not enough to be closed for 2, 3, 4, 5 months. So I think it's going to be really bad. And I think as more people file for unemployment or lose their jobs and the rest of the economy suffers, the money that we have in our pockets as consumers we're going to have to be really careful. And is it, do we have $20 in our pocket that used to go towards buying a 4-pack of the hazy IPA? Now that needs to go and buy milk and bread and
toilet paper,
and but necessities, as it were. So I don't know what's going to happen. The statistics that I'm sure you've seen from the Brewers Association are pretty grim. New York State put out some stats earlier this week. They're pretty grim. Monday night did a survey, the brewery down in Atlanta, also kind of pretty grim. I keep looking for good news, and I keep finding it in sort of the way that people are rising up to the challenge and still helping out each other in bad situations. But I think from a business standpoint, by the time we close the book on 2020, which by all accounts pretty much seems to be a dumpster fire of a year, I think we're going to be in a completely different beer world when the ball drops in Times Square.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting seeing all these changes from my local brewers. I've already seen at least 3 or 4 shut the door and just not intending to open up, even when COVID lifts. I'm in Connecticut, so the good. I'm sorry.
By choice.
By choice, I'm in Connecticut. Yes. Yeah, I moved to Connecticut about a year ago, believe it or not. But
there's a first time for every answer, huh? That's cool.
The crazy thing is they just passed recently here that allows breweries to actually deliver directly to home. And I think that this is, as bad as it is, I think that this might help the brewing industry get more legislation for things change coming out of this. So not just, we're going to allow you to deliver home during this obvious crisis, but maybe there can be more direct-to-consumer laws that are passed because of this situation that would help kickstart it once post-COVID lifts. Because, people wait online for Other Half and Trillium and Treehouse in the line outside their tap rooms. But these local breweries that don't have the kind of clout that these ones are, they're really the ones that suffer. So I'm hoping that some of these changes help and give them the ability to do that. We've seen some breweries do groceries in Connecticut now, which is trying to get through this period. So it's going to be interesting to see what laws come out of this and what laws stays, because, alcohol to go never was a thing. And now it becomes a thing. Is that going to last post-COVID? I'm not sure.
Well, what's interesting, so you had Augie Carton on Saturday. He and I co-host Steal This Beer, which is a podcast that's been around for 5 years, every Monday, by the way. And shameless plug. But we had JC Tatro from Trillium on this week, and we asked him, will you continue doing deliveries after this ends? And he said, absolutely not. It's not feasible because right now there's nobody on the road. So he can do deliveries. He can leave Canton. He can do deliveries all over Boston and still have a van home. He won't be able to make, a half or even a quarter of the deliveries that he's doing right now once Boston traffic gets back to normal. And so, yes, we should absolutely hope that legislators push through things to make it easier for breweries to do business. But for those of us who are expecting when life gets back to normal, that we can still get front door delivery from our beer like we do groceries and other things, it's likely not going to happen because breweries don't have the infrastructure for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger ones, the Trilliums, the Treehouses, they don't really need that. People will go to the locations. But I'm more the lower ones, the ones that are just starting out, the ones that have the mom and pop kind of shop that, they need that kind of situation. It could help. I mean, I know in North Haven, 12% Project is doing delivery now, all in Connecticut, and they brew things like Fat Orange Cat, a bunch of other ones there that are local and small. Having an area where we can get that delivered is helpful for people. I think that just helps beer become more and more, legislation free. As horrible as it sounds, sometimes bad things need to happen so that their rules are changed. But hoping that these things kind of do maintain itself from there. So more questions are coming in through this chat, even though Jonathan will leave me, but I'm going to throw them up on the board here. So Tim Hitchens says, a question for John. What's your
question about barley wine?
What's your secret to continuing doing a podcast with someone like Augie for the last 5 years? What's the secret? Great question, right?
It's a great question. What's the secret to continuing to do a podcast with someone like Augie Carton for 5 years? Listen, I give Augie a lot of grief and a lot of hell, and he's deserving of all of it. But the man has an excellent palate, and I really enjoy doing the show, even though I can't get a word in edgewise. I really enjoy doing the show because I'm always learning something about food. I make a joke about it. I'm always learning something about wine on the show. But on Steal This Beer, we do blind tastings. We drink out of black glasses, and we don't know what we're drinking. And we can sometimes trash a beer, and sometimes we can be loving a beer, and sometimes we can't figure it out. He's always sort of teasing something interesting out of a beer, and I find that as a drinker to be really inspiring. And you know, we have fun, and we've had fun for a long time. And I think sometimes we get like a little bit like Mike and the Mad Dog, which is a New York sports radio reference where you know, we don't necessarily want to talk to each other. And then there's other days like where, you know, like we're excited to talk to each other. And I think that it makes for good radio. And, you know, I've had a lot of fun doing the show with him and Justin Kennedy and Brian Cass for 5 years. And I hope we keep doing it for forever. So there's no secret. It's just, it's a fun way to spend a Monday afternoon. And we're grateful for the listeners, and we're grateful that, you know, people dig what we're doing.
Yeah, another question coming in unrelated to this topic, but Brian wants to know if any of those Utopia bottles behind John are full. I've got one right over here.
Yeah,
somewhat. That is a little full. What about you?
Yeah, they are. And
awesome.
Brian knows me, so if he wants to come over when all of this is lifted, we'll do a vertical. One of the weird things about being a reporter covering beer is that I get a lot of beer sent to me. And sometimes it's for review. You know, like I've been doing reviews when I was back at All About. I've done reviews at some other places, and I'm certainly doing them for wine enthusiasts these days. And so I get a lot of beer sent to me. Sometimes it's solicited, sometimes it's not. But Utopia just sort of seems to show up every 2 years, and it's really nice.
You're lucky dog.
No, I believe me, I'm very, very fortunate. So I keep them out, not necessarily to be like, oh, look, I got Utopias. But when people come over, I used to keep them on top of the fridge at the apartment in Jersey City. And when people would come over and be like, oh my gosh, is that Utopias? I'd be like, yeah, let's open them. And you don't have to have a special occasion to open up some of these. And so anybody who comes over to the house knows that they can hit these bottles. We can do a vertical, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I got mine actually, the same situation. I got it sent to me, and I had it when my son was born 3 years ago. I believe it's 2010, my version there. But it's still, even my son was born 3 years ago, and it still wasn't, it needed more. You know, it was still pretty alcoholic from that perspective. But
there used to be a public relations person at Boston Beer, Michelle Diamandis, who is just a wonderful person. If you had to, you know, talk to PR people at breweries, she's wonderful to talk to. But she always had a really heavy hand with the Utopias, and would like wind up pouring, like at GABF, the Great American Beer Festival, she'd wind up pouring like 3-ounce glasses of Utopia. And John Page, who I used to work with at All About Beer, he was the managing editor, like drank mine and his during one night at the GABF one year. So he drank 6 ounces of Utopia, so 27%.
Wow.
And had almost no memory the next morning of it. And it became known as the Diamandis pour. And
I hear you.
Yeah.
I remember at Extreme Beer Festival this year in Boston, they had, you know, obviously had Utopia tap around an hour into the individual event, and there was a line, you know, all the way out the door waiting for that for literally the smallest amount of pour. So I have to say this is one of the rarest occasions that I had a chance to try it, and it's pretty incredible to go through that process.
See, all right, so this is where I think that you fell down on the job, right? Because you own Beer Advocate now, so you could have just cut the line and been like, "Hi, this is my festival."
So, a lot of people always say a lot of people always say that, you know, even friends and family would say, why don't you just cut the line, Greg? Don't you just show them who you are?
Yeah.
I'm just a regular guy like everybody else. I want to be treated like everybody else. I don't want to use that card unless I have to. So, you know, let people enjoy theirs, and I'll go in if there's some leftover scraps. You always want to let them.
I feel like you're not wielding your power to your benefit. I'm sorry to hear it.
Another great question we have here. I lost it here. Oh my God. A question from Dave asked, did you do any home brewing at all on your side? Obviously with your vast experience, and this is something you dabble in at home at all?
Yeah. Not for a while, but I have in the past. And, I dig home brewing. My problem with it, and I love people who do it. But my personal issue is I love to cook, but I also don't necessarily love to follow recipes, which is funny for somebody who's written 2 cookbooks. The recipes in the cookbook are solid, but homebrewing is so much like baking, where you have to follow exact recipes, you have to follow time, you have to follow temperature. I don't necessarily have the patience for it, and so I would rather drink somebody else's beer that they spent time on and that they're really proud of, as opposed to either getting lucky or wasting an afternoon making vinegar. But one of the other podcasts that I'm doing these days is for BYO Magazine, which I think is a great print publication, and everybody should subscribe to keep print alive. And so I'm talking to a lot of home brewers and a lot of small brewers again. And I've been sort of thinking about it. Now that we're living in the burbs, maybe I'll get back into it. But in the meantime, literally my basement is filled with really great beer. I don't know why I try to sell these reputations by making something damn near undrinkable.
Yeah, that's true. I remember when I lived in New York City, trying that. My wife said, "Don't ever try that again. You stunk up the entire apartment, the 1 bedroom we had when we were living in there." But now that we're in the suburbs, just like you, maybe I'll kick it off again and see what she says. But
you remember Jeff Cioletti, right?
Yes, I do.
So just as a quick aside, so Greg and I used to be in a group of beer enthusiasts that has really sort of turned out to be a murderer's row of people in and around beer these days. So I forget the name of it. Was it like Brew York or something? And enthusiasts would get together, but it was you who went on to found Untapped, Bob Olson, who went on to found Bolero Snort in New Jersey. You had Claire Goggins and Adam Sivitz, who are both out in Oregon working for breweries right now. John Kleinchester's at Two Roads. I was there doing stuff. Jeff Cioletti, who now runs a spirits magazine, but has written some beer books. Who else was there? Crystal Hunt, who I guess works for AB now. John Moxie was there.
Oh yeah,
he's out at Rockwell Beer, and So we had this great group: Chris O'Leary, and then Sarah and Giancarlo Anisi. Who've written some books, but Cioletti and I homebrewed together once, and I realized that I never wanted to homebrew with somebody else again because we were standing in his bathtub trying to do a transfer. And when you have 2 out of shape middle-aged guys trying to homebrew, standing in a bathtub in a Jersey City apartment, I realized that it wasn't necessarily the glamorous lifestyle that I had.
It's crazy that group has gone on. I mean, we were early on all drinking together, and when I was living in New York, and
it was a decade ago. Yeah,
I know. And just as you're naming those people, it's like, wow, we all kind of followed our passion for drinking beer into the beer industry. That's very rare when you do.
Think somebody needs to do a documentary on our
I would
beer
appreciate that
group, because we would get together at the New Jersey Beer Company, which really was just a hole of a brewery. And I love Matt Steinberg, not the one from Exhibit A, but the Jersey one who founded it. But there were holes in the wall. I think he had gotten his stainless from China and it started to rust. It was everything was really pretty terrible back in the day. But we had fun, and it is so cool to think about that group and how we all, like you said, sort of followed our path and followed our passions and are either in beer or beer adjacent these days. And I don't know if there's many other groups like that, like ours.
Yeah. I mean, I think, one other question that was asked earlier, because it's gone out of the chat because it was an early question, I missed it, but getting more serious here, question from Kevin King asked, John, how do you think Tavola, Beer Drop, and other similar services will change beer distribution across the country based on this COVID-19 thing? Is that something, what do you think about that?
I think it has the potential to change it. I think a lot of what it has done, from what I've seen, has given people an opportunity to maybe get a hand on some beers that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise, and giving them choice to pick it out, I think is kind of nice as well. In beer, and as beer consumers, there has always been this sort of trend to, can I get my hands on something and make my friends jealous, or can I get my hands on something, or how many untapped, toasts can I get, from that. I think especially going forward, if you can put money into your local brewery, I think that's probably a better way. But at the same time, I don't know how it might change beer overall, but I do know that it has made it easier for people to get a hands on beer that they might have had to, mule or use back alley channels in the past. But but again, like, I don't know. I guess it all just depends on your drinker motivation.
Right.
Like, why do you feel like you need these beers? Why do you feel like you want these beers? And then if it fulfills you, great. If it gives you some sort of good feeling inside, aside from just the booze, awesome.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, well, then that's something else. I don't know how it's going to change or not. I still like going to the local brewery and buying 6-packs. I still like going to the package store and walking through the aisles. It's these tactile things that I'm really missing right now during COVID, of walking through the beer aisles to see what's new and to see the can art and to see, even just the integrity of the package, and making my purchasing decisions based on that, as opposed to just, clicking on an app.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. One question from Stuart asked,
Hi, Stuart.
what is a beer trend that is on everybody's radar, but you think potentially could be the next big thing? It could be a beer style, a variation on a style, a brewing technique. Very long question here, but you get the kind of story here. So, I always, when I look at this question here, I always think about a couple of years ago when Not Your Father's Root Beer was the next greatest thing on the market from the beer world. Where
I was just about to open one.
There you go, right there, and everyone was ranting and raving about this stuff, and and then hard seltzer right now is a big thing. But what was kind of your thoughts on this, John?
All right, so there's two answers to this. There's the beer writer answer, which is lager. Lager is the next big thing, and we should all be really excited about lager. And it's purely selfish on the part of writers and brewers, because we all want to be drinking really good, thoughtful lagers. And in fact, I actually just opened up a Tactical Maneuver, and it's a Foeder Helles from Cerebral out in Colorado.
Colorado, great brewery.
It's a fantastic brewery, and so that's the answer. Like, we'd like to see more lagers. As far as the trends go, I think we are going to see a lot of small batch seltzers. I think we are going to see, you know what I think we're probably going to see is a return to basics. I think because of COVID, a lot of the, short shelf life IPAs, they don't play well right now. And brewers are really sort of having a chance to hit the reset button and to spend some time doing technical knowledge. Keith Lemke, who is an instructor at Siebel for many years, the brewing school, has been encouraging brewers to use any downtime that they have during COVID to really go back and hit the books again. And I do think that we've been on a rush for innovation for so long that we've lost some of our traditions. There's nothing wrong with making an English mild. There's nothing wrong with making a basic porter. There's nothing wrong with making. And so I would hopefully like to see some of just the classic styles come back.
Yeah.
And to reintroduce a whole new generation of drinkers to base styles before we start going into the lemon, verbena, basil, whatever, imperial stouts, as opposed to, what does just a dry Irish stout that's not made by Guinness on its own taste like?
Exactly.
And
I'm from Framingham, Massachusetts. I grew up there, and Jack Abbey's is a great example of that. I mean, a lager-based brewery, really kind of pushing the boundaries from there and sticking to what they know. I mean, it's so easy to easily say, let's make a hazy IPA. Let's do this. And I appreciate when there is, it has that kind of elemency to it. So it's really cool to be able to see, lagers come back in, and that's really a Pilsner is another one that people have definitely been going over big time on that front as well.
But well made, and that's we have to understand what beer is supposed to taste like, and what these base styles are supposed to be all about. And for me, I think that's the really important thing is if I show up at some place and it's like they didn't know how to do a diacetyl rest for their lagers. Well, I don't want to drink your lager, and you're not necessarily kicking the can down the road. So I definitely like to see, quality being paid attention to as well. And that's something that I think some of craft has struggled with for the last couple of years, and maybe this will help out. I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, John, I can't appreciate you more being on the show. Just a couple of notes for our viewers here about what's coming up next. We have next Saturday, or this coming Saturday, we have Garrett Oliver, which I'm super excited to talk about on the show as well. He'll be on Saturday.
Writing the foreword to the American Craft Beer Cookbook.
I know. I know he wrote that, so I'll have to bring it up there. Maybe you can hop in that show, John, ask a question. That'd be great. But
I'm just going to do your job, Greg. And I have 9 jobs right now. I can't just keep showing up on everybody's podcast and StreamYard and everything else in between. All right,
There
I'm
you
sorry,
go.
you were going to sell some ads. Go sell some ads.
We also have coming up next Thursday for Happy Hour. I'm really excited about this. We have M. Salters, which is the founder of Pints and Panels, an award-winning cartoonist and advanced cicerone, and she'll be joined by a guy I work with all the time, Rob Brink. He's our product designer at Untapped. They also do a lot of can art, so it'll be a great discussion about the future of can art and a little bit about what they've done in the past. Rob has done a lot of Wilmington Brewing can art as well down here in our headquarters in Wilmington, North Carolina. So really excited about that. And if you have any questions for either one of those two people or any feedback about our show, make sure you check out, go to untap.tv or email us at media@untap.com, and we'll be happy to help. Before we wrap up here and do a little more of the sponsor stuff, anything from you, John, where people can find you on Twitter, some of the things on your side, where can they find you and connect with you?
All of the places. I'm on Twitter at John_Holl, and it's JOHNHOLL. And then I'm on Instagram at Mr. John Holl. But then follow the Beer Edge and check out what we're doing these days. And it's just, I think, on all of the social medias at the Beer Edge. And certainly subscribe to Wine Enthusiast magazine so you can read reviews, but also to keep print alive. Subscribe to BYO magazine to keep print alive and to support great small companies that are doing wonderful things in a medium that I love quite dearly. And listen to Steal This Beer, and listen to the Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast, and listen to the Beer Edge podcast. And I think I'm on Untapped as well. So
yes, gotta plug that.
So Untapped, I realized that because I joined so early, because I know you, that I actually have my full name. It's just John Holl. I didn't have to do an underscore. I didn't have to do a Mr. I didn't have to pretend I'm an Esquire or anything. And my avatar on there, I realized, is a picture of my dog Pepper from 2011.
There you go.
So say hi, and whenever I check into the app, I will toast you back or whatever we're doing these days. I'll give you bottle caps.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Sean. One word from our sponsor before we end here is Postmates. We really appreciate Postmates support of this particular show. If you use the code UNTAPPED, you can get $100 delivery credit as a new customer of Postmates. It's a pretty good deal.
That's
they also
deal. That's not a pretty good deal. That's a great deal for Postmates. Postmates for when you need to do Postmates. That you got to.
You're hired as our sponsor person there and stuff like
Promo
that.
code UNTAPPED, $100 credit for all new Postmate customers. Tell them Greg sent you.
Tell them Greg sent you. That's right. Tell them Greg sent you. Go to Postmates.com, download the app, and get $100 off your first delivery order as a new customer there. And the promo code is UNTAPPED. Thanks again so much, Sean. Really appreciate it. Always great to chat with you. Hope you're well and safe, as well as your family. And best of luck to your dog. And thanks to you for watching, everybody. And make sure you stay safe out there. And cheers.
Thanks, pal. Cheers.